Dr. Sarah Chen, a clinical psychologist specializing in anxiety patterns that emerged after 2024, has been studying why mental health shifted so dramatically in 2025. What she discovered challenges how we understand racing thoughts and late-night worry spirals. She's worked with thousands of patients who felt trapped in their own minds, people whose anxiety symptoms didn't match anything in traditional textbooks. Dr. Chen uncovered a new approach that reorients how we handle overthinking, and it's based on something most therapists never considered. The surprising part isn't just that it works, but why our brains started responding differently to stress in the first place. What she found in her research reveals patterns that most people don't even realize are happening. The 2025 mental health crisis nobody saw coming. Research shows a dramatic rise in chronic overthinking since 2024, with clinicians reporting new levels of nonstop mental activity that they've never encountered before. Dr. Chen looked at me with this expression that said she'd been waiting for someone to ask about these numbers. The thing is, everyone keeps talking about post-pandemic recovery and getting back to normal, but what actually happened after 2024 created something we've never dealt with before as a species. What I'm seeing in my practice isn't traditional anxiety, Dr. Chen explains. These patients come in and they describe their minds as literally unable to stop processing information. One woman told me it feels like her brain never gets a break from making decisions. The shift happened so gradually that most people didn't notice it was happening. We adapted to constant connectivity, constant updates, constant decisions about every tiny aspect of our lives. Our brains started treating normal daily choices like life or death situations. The really disturbing part is how our neural pathways are actually changing. Research indicates altered decision-making pathways in overthinkers following the widespread adoption of post-2024 technologies. Dr. Chen shows me data that reveals unprecedented patterns of mental activity. This is what happens after 2 years of algorithmic feeds, smart home decisions, AI assistants asking for input, and social media that responds to our every micro-expression, she says. We're seeing new neural patterns that didn't exist 5 years ago. The most frustrating thing for both patients and therapists is that standard cognitive behavioral therapy techniques sometimes fall short for these modern overthinking patterns. Meditation apps that used to calm racing minds now seem to make the mental chatter worse. Dr. Chen admits that even experienced therapists were struggling to understand why their go-to methods weren't connecting with patients anymore. She tells me about Marcus, a software engineer who came to her office after 3 different therapists couldn't help him. His symptoms were textbook anxiety, restless sleep, constant worry, inability to focus, but none of the standard approaches made a dent. He would do breathing exercises and his heart rate would actually increase. He'd try progressive muscle relaxation and report feeling more agitated afterward. It was like his nervous system was wired backwards, Dr. Chen recalls. Marcus described his mind as being stuck in a loop where every thought triggered 3 more thoughts, and those triggered 3 more, until he felt paralyzed by the sheer volume of mental activity. What Marcus didn't realize, and what most people struggling with overthinking don't realize, is that their symptoms aren't random. There's a clear pattern connecting the apps they use, the media they consume, the way their homes are set up with smart devices, and even their sleep environment. Dr. Chen discovered that patients who seemed most resistant to traditional anxiety treatment all shared specific lifestyle factors that were literally training their brains to expect constant stimulation and immediate responses to every thought. The human brain evolved to handle maybe 10 to 15 significant decisions per day, Dr. Chen explains. Now we're making hundreds of micro-decisions hourly. Should I respond to this notification? Which of these 5 recommended videos should I watch? Do I want the AI to adjust my thermostat, or should I do it manually? What should I order for lunch from these 47 options? Each tiny choice activates the decision-making centers of our brain, and after months of this, those centers never really turn off. The mystery deepens when you look at the data on who's thriving versus who's drowning. About 27% of people seem completely immune to this new form of mental overwhelm. They use the same technology, live in the same world, but their brains aren't stuck in overdrive. Dr. Chen spent months trying to identify what these resilient individuals were doing differently, and the answer surprised everyone. It's not about digital detoxes or meditation retreats, she says. The people who aren't struggling with overthinking have one thing in common, and it's not what you'd expect. These individuals haven't rejected modern technology or gone back to flip phones. They haven't adopted special morning routines or expensive therapy programs. They've simply maintained one specific cognitive habit that the majority of us abandoned without realizing it. The research shows that this isn't just another mental health trend that will fade in a few years. The brain changes documented in 2025 appear to be permanent unless actively reversed. Dr. Chen points to longitudinal studies tracking the same individuals over 18 months. People who don't address this pattern see their symptoms worsen over time, not improve. The brain essentially learns to expect constant mental stimulation, and when it doesn't get it, it creates its own through worry and rumination. What makes this particularly challenging is that the solutions people reach for tend to make the problem worse. Productivity apps promise to organize your thoughts, but actually add more decision-making burden. Mindfulness apps provide temporary relief, but don't address the underlying neural patterns. Even therapy can become another item on the mental to-do list rather than genuine healing. The breakthrough came when Dr. Chen realized that treating this as anxiety was missing the point entirely. These patients aren't anxious about specific things, she observed. They're experiencing a fundamental dysregulation in how their brains process everyday information. The anxiety is a symptom, not the root cause. This insight led to a completely different approach that addresses the neural rewiring rather than just managing the emotional symptoms. The most telling indicator of who will struggle with overthinking in 2025 comes down to something called decision fatigue recovery. People whose brains have maintained the ability to fully disengage from choice-making for specific periods show remarkable resilience to the modern overthinking epidemic. Those who have lost this ability, often without realizing it, find themselves trapped in mental loops that traditional anxiety treatments can't touch. Dr. Chen discovered that this recovery ability isn't about willpower or meditation skills. It's about whether your brain has retained access to a specific neural state that allows complete cognitive rest. Most people lost access to this state gradually between 2022 and 2024, as digital environments became more sophisticated at capturing and holding attention. The good news is that this neural state can be restored, but it requires understanding exactly how modern technology has changed our mental landscape. But here's where it gets really interesting. Dr. Chen noticed that her patients' overthinking followed predictable patterns throughout the day, with the most intense episodes happening at very specific times. The worst moments weren't during stressful work meetings or difficult conversations. They were happening when people should have been winding down for sleep. Why your brain keeps you up at 2 a.m., and it's not stress. The pattern becomes clear when you examine what happens during those late-night hours. You know that feeling when you're lying in bed at 2 a.m., and suddenly your brain decides it's the perfect time to remember that awkward thing you said 3 years ago? Or maybe you find yourself Googling whether that weird pain in your side could possibly be 17 different rare diseases, each more terrifying than the last. Dr. Chen laughs when I bring this up because apparently this exact scenario plays out in her office constantly. I have patients who come in exhausted, telling me they spent 4 hours researching symptoms online and somehow convinced themselves they have both lupus and a brain tumor, she says. The thing is, this isn't actually about stress the way most people think it is. What's happening in your brain at 2 a.m. is fundamentally different from daytime anxiety. Dr. Chen explains that between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., chronic overthinkers experience a specific neurochemical shift that most people don't know about. Your brain starts producing what I call a dopamine deficit, she says. Throughout the day, you've been getting tiny hits of dopamine from notifications, likes, messages, even just unlocking your phone. But at night, when that external stimulation stops, your brain goes into withdrawal. This is where the concept of digital dopamine debt comes into play. Every time you check your phone during the day, you're essentially borrowing against your evening mental state. Social media platforms are designed like slot machines, giving you unpredictable rewards that keep your dopamine system constantly activated. Dr. Chen shows me research indicating that the average person checks their phone 144 times per day, with each check creating a small dopamine spike followed by a subtle crash. By evening, your brain has been through this cycle dozens of times, and it's essentially depleted, she explains. The delayed anxiety response from screen exposure creates a perfect storm for overthinking. Most people assume their racing thoughts are about work stress or relationship problems, but the timing tells a different story. Dr. Chen points to studies showing that people who use screens heavily throughout the day report their peak anxiety occurring 3 to 4 hours after their last major digital interaction. It's not coincidence that people feel most anxious right around bedtime, she says. Their brains are trying to generate the stimulation they've become accustomed to, but there's nothing left to process except their own thoughts. Dr. Chen tells me about Sarah, a marketing executive who came to her completely baffled by her sleep patterns. Sarah would fall asleep easily most nights, but 3 nights a week she'd lie awake until 3 a.m. with her mind racing about everything from work deadlines to whether she'd offended someone with a text message. What made Sarah's case interesting was how specific the pattern was, Dr. Chen recalls. It wasn't random at all. The sleepless nights always followed her heaviest social media days. Sarah had been tracking her mood and sleep for months, trying to identify triggers, but she'd never thought to look at her phone usage data. When Sarah finally compared her screen time with her sleep patterns, the correlation was obvious. On days when she spent more than 4 hours on various apps, scrolling through feeds and responding to messages, she would inevitably end up staring at the ceiling hours later. Her brain had become conditioned to expect constant input, Dr. Chen explains. On high-usage days, the dopamine debt was so significant that her mind would literally create its own stimulation through worry and rumination. This is why counting sheep and traditional sleep advice fails so miserably for the overthinking mind. The problem isn't that you can't relax, it's that your brain chemistry has been altered by your daytime digital habits. Telling someone to clear their mind when they have a dopamine deficit is like telling someone with low blood sugar to just stop thinking about food. Dr. Chen emphasizes that the brain is trying to solve a chemical problem, not an emotional one. Most evening routines actually make the overthinking worse without people realizing it. Patients tell me they do everything right, Dr. Chen says. They dim the lights, they avoid caffeine, they read instead of watching TV. But then they check their phone one last time before bed, or they use their tablet to read, or they have their smartwatch tracking their sleep. Each of these seemingly innocent actions reactivates the same neural pathways that spent the day in overdrive. The connection between daytime decisions and nighttime mental chaos runs deeper than most people realize. Every notification you respond to, every app you open, every algorithm-generated recommendation you engage with throughout the day is training your brain to expect immediate responses to thoughts and impulses. Dr. Chen describes it as creating cognitive restlessness. Your brain learns that every thought deserves immediate attention and investigation, which is exactly the opposite of what you need for sleep. There's something almost comical about the late-night Google spiral phenomenon. You start by searching for why you can't sleep, which leads to reading about insomnia causes, which somehow leads to learning about rare neurological conditions, which makes you wonder if that headache you had last week was actually a symptom of something serious. Before you know it, you're 3 hours deep in medical forums, completely convinced you have a condition that affects 0.0001% of the population. Dr. Chen sees this pattern constantly. The algorithmic search results are designed to keep you engaged, not to give you peace of mind, she points out. The more dramatic and concerning the information, the more likely you are to keep searching. What makes this particularly frustrating is that the information-gathering behavior feels productive in the moment. Your brain interprets the research as problem-solving, which provides a small hit of satisfaction. But it's a false solution that actually deepens the underlying issue. You're feeding the exact neural pathway that's keeping you awake, Dr. Chen explains. Each search confirms to your brain that thoughts require immediate investigation and resolution. The specific brain chemistry shift that happens between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. in chronic overthinkers involves a dramatic drop in dopamine availability combined with elevated cortisol from the day's accumulated microstresses. During these hours, the prefrontal cortex, which normally helps regulate thoughts and emotions, becomes less effective at filtering mental content. Simultaneously, the brain's default mode network, responsible for self-referential thinking, becomes hyperactive. What you end up with is a brain that's chemically primed for rumination, but lacks the executive function to control it, Dr. Chen explains. The melatonin that should be signaling sleepiness gets disrupted by the lingering effects of blue light exposure, creating a situation where you're tired but wired. Your thoughts feel more urgent and important than they actually are because your brain's normal filtering system isn't working properly. This neurochemical combination creates what Dr. Chen calls artificial significance syndrome. Minor concerns become major worries, small social interactions get analyzed for hidden meanings, and routine decisions feel overwhelming. The brain essentially tricks itself into believing that late-night thinking sessions are productive and necessary, when they're actually just symptoms of digital dopamine debt playing out in real time. But the dopamine debt is only part of the picture. What Dr. Chen discovered next revealed something even more concerning about how our digital environments are reshaping our mental landscape. The platforms we use during the day aren't just depleting our brain chemistry, they're actively training our minds to expect the worst possible outcomes in every situation. The AI anxiety loop, that's rewiring your mind. The recommendation algorithms powering social media and content platforms in 2025 have reached a level of sophistication that even their creators didn't anticipate. These systems can now predict and influence your emotional state with frightening accuracy. Dr. Chen pulls up data showing that modern AI can identify signs of anxiety or depression from typing patterns, scroll speed, and even how long you pause before liking a post. What we're seeing is that these algorithms have become incredibly good at keeping people engaged by triggering specific psychological responses, she explains. But they're not designed to make you feel good. They're designed to make you feel something, and anxiety is one of the most reliable engagement drivers. The way recommendation systems work now is they've learned that content predicting problems or highlighting potential threats keeps people scrolling longer than positive content. Dr. Chen shows me research from major tech companies revealing that posts about relationship drama get 43% more engagement than posts about happy relationships. Content about health scares performs 67% better than content about wellness success stories. The algorithms have figured out that human brains are wired to pay attention to threats, Dr. Chen says, so they feed us a steady diet of everything that could go wrong. This creates a psychological conditioning effect that most people don't recognize. Every time you open an app, your brain starts preparing for bad news because that's what the algorithm has trained you to expect. Dr. Chen explains that recommendation systems are essentially teaching our nervous systems to stay in a state of hypervigilance. Your brain learns that scrolling equals discovering problems, she says. After months of this conditioning, just seeing the app icon on your phone can trigger a stress response. The psychology behind why we can't stop scrolling even when it makes us feel worse connects to something called intermittent variable reinforcement. It's the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. Sometimes you get rewarded with content that makes you laugh or feel good, but most of the time you get content that creates mild anxiety or concern. Your brain keeps scrolling because it's searching for the next positive hit, Dr. Chen explains. But the algorithm knows that if it gave you too many positive hits, you'd feel satisfied and close the app. So it keeps you in this constant state of almost getting what you need, but never quite getting enough. Recent data shows that AI-curated content has created artificial urgency in our daily lives in ways that previous generations never experienced. News algorithms prioritize breaking stories and developing situations, making every day feel like something crucial is happening. Shopping algorithms create flash sales and limited-time offers that trigger fear of missing out. Even entertainment algorithms use phrases like "trending now" and "everyone is talking about" to make content consumption feel urgent. Dr. Chen points out that this constant manufactured urgency trains our brains to treat non-urgent situations as urgent. Dr. Chen tells me about Rebecca, a graphic designer who came to therapy because her anxiety was interfering with her work. Rebecca noticed that her anxiety would spike randomly throughout the day, but she couldn't identify any external triggers. "We started tracking when her anxiety peaked, and the pattern was clear," Dr. Chen recalls. Every time Rebecca opened Instagram or TikTok, her heart rate would increase within minutes, even if she was looking at content that was supposed to be entertaining or inspirational. Rebecca realized that certain apps had become anxiety triggers, but she couldn't explain why because the content wasn't obviously stressful. The breakthrough came when Rebecca started paying attention not just to what she was seeing, but to how the content was presented. The constant stream of people achieving things, looking perfect, having amazing experiences, or sharing dramatic life updates created a background sense of inadequacy and urgency. Even positive content was making her anxious because it implied she should be doing more, achieving more, or feeling more fulfilled, Dr. Chen explains. Rebecca discovered that her brain had learned to associate these apps with social comparison and self-evaluation, turning even leisure time into a source of stress. What makes this particularly insidious is that we're essentially participating in an unprecedented psychological experiment without realizing it or consenting to it. Dr. Chen emphasizes that never before in human history have people's thoughts and emotions been so systematically influenced by machines designed to capture and hold attention. These algorithms know things about your psychological patterns that you don't even know about yourself, she says. They can predict when you're feeling lonely, insecure, or bored, and they serve content specifically designed to exploit those emotional states. This has led Dr. Chen to identify algorithmic anxiety as a distinct category of mental health challenge. Unlike traditional anxiety disorders that develop from life experiences or genetic predisposition, algorithmic anxiety is created by repeated exposure to AI-curated content designed to trigger engagement through emotional activation.